Declaro abierta
The 8,476th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. Members of the Council have before them two documents, S/2019/186 and document S/2019/190, which contain the texts of two draft resolutions, respectively. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolutions before it.
Daré ahora la palabra a los miembros del Consejo.
I will now give the floor to members of the Security Council who wish to make a statement before the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Doy las gracias al señor representante de la Federación Rusa.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин председатель.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have before us a resolution that has been presented by the United States of America, a draft resolution submitted by the United States of America. We have finally arrived at the culmination of the United States' double standards show on Venezuela. 1 month ago and the day before yesterday during a Security Council meeting, it became absolutely clear that the majority of countries in the Western Hemisphere, irrespective of their political affiliations, advocate a resolution to the problems in Venezuela by the Venezuelan people themselves on the basis of dialogue. Such nationwide dialogue, inclusive nationwide dialogue, is the most important thing right now. But unfortunately, Washington is obstinately seeking to escalate tensions and to implement their scenario for an unconstitutional change of government or an ouster of the government. Let us take a look at the text of the U.S. draft resolution for what exactly the United States is proposing that the Security Council vote for. And here is what it is. Acknowledging the National Assembly of Venezuela, and I quote, the constitutional authority and the presidential elections that were held last March to deem them to be neither free nor fair, and this 1 year after they took place. For the sake of this, the U.S. drafted the resolution. The hypocritical concern of the humanitarian situation in the country is a mere smokescreen. But perhaps the United States has another goal: to enter into history. Were this resolution to be adopted, this would be the first time in history when the Security Council would dismiss one and would appoint another president of a sovereign country. Is this world diplomacy in action? I'm not even speaking of the political component here. This is not even a matter of Maduro and Guaido. Do you truly fail to understand that this is legally untenable and null and void? Is this thinly veiled trolling? Is it a mockery of members of the Security Council, those who plan to support the U.S. draft? Do you understand that you will become complicit in a legal theater of the absurd? The U.S. delegation cannot but note that their resolution has no chance of being adopted. Nonetheless, they are deliberately tabling it at the Council to then point a finger at those who allegedly are obstructing the establishment of democracy in Venezuela. You are now deliberately undermining the unity of the Council. But do you need this unity? Our U.S. colleagues apparently have forgotten what international law is. You only have ultimatums, sanctions, and threats of use of force left in your diplomatic toolbox. Of course, we note that this has all been initiated solely to accuse a non-consenting state of obstructing the delivery of assistance to the Venezuelan people. However, this is yet another example of shameless propaganda. On 26 February, we spoke at length and in detail of the fact that Russia and China freely, without any problems, delivered humanitarian assistance to the Venezuelan people. Only the U.S. didn't manage to do this. They disregarded the sovereignty and inviolability of the borders of a sovereign state. I mentioned this the day before yesterday and will repeat it today. If the United States were genuinely keen to help the people of Venezuela, then they would operate through official channels, through any of the UN accredited agencies in that country. But that's not their goal. This is but a smokescreen. Their goal is regime change. This is probably the most glaring, the most egregious, the most clear instance of implementation of the notorious concept of humanitarian intervention with humanitarian component and with humanitarian pretexts. Such a rules-based order, instead of international law, is what is being proposed to us. And this is consistently being talked about by Western colleagues. For this very reason, we drafted an alternative draft resolution, the aim of which is not to stimulate, not to incite political intrigues and regime change, but rather to genuinely help the Venezuelan people in their efforts to normalize the situation in the country. We stress that any international assistance needs to be delivered on the basis of the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence, and the consent of a country's legitimate government. Furthermore, in our document, we extend support for international mediations initiatives, including the Montevideo mechanism, which would help the Venezuelan people to achieve what is most important now, namely political settlement. The U.S. draft simply has nothing of the sort because it is not geared towards resolving the problems. Yesterday, we convened expert-level consultations on our text. We listened to the views of members of the Security Council, including the U.S. representative. We heard not a single specific comment on our draft. Western experts said that they would not work on our text. And U.S. colleagues immediately tabled their draft for the vote. Where is diplomacy here? Where is the quest for compromise? This is all a combination of publicity, largely dictated by domestic political concerns and agendas. We regret the fact that the Security Council has once again been dragged into this. We are seriously concerned with the fact that today's meeting may be exploited as a step for preparations of a real, not humanitarian intervention, as a pretext for external intervention for the as a result of the alleged inability of the Security Council to resolve the situation in Venezuela. We wish once again to turn to those members of the Security Council who genuinely wish to lend assistance, not to become complicit in this political show. We call for all to vote against the U.S. draft, to support our document, which has been specifically drafted to avoid wording that creates a dissent and is genuinely geared towards helping the Venezuelan people for advancement of international assistance and international mediation. Thank you.
Gracias al señor representante de la Federación.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. We shall first proceed to submit to the vote the draft resolution contained in document S/2019/186, submitted by the United States of America. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2019/186 please raise their hand?
En contra.
Against?
Abstención.
Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows. Votes in favour, 9. Votes against, 3. Abstentions, 3. The draft resolution has not been adopted, owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. It has not been approved, as I stated.
Daré ahora
I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make statements following the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. The situation in Venezuela demands our action now. The corrupt former Maduro regime has caused an economic collapse that threatens peace and security throughout the region. Millions of Venezuelans have fled their country in search of food, medicine, and opportunity. The time for a peaceful transition to democracy is now. Each member of the international community that joins in recognizing the Guaido government is supporting the people of Venezuela as they strive to reclaim their democracy. Mr. President, regrettably, by voting against this resolution, some members of this council continue to shield Maduro and his cronies and prolong the suffering of the Venezuelan people. This man-made crisis has extended well beyond Venezuela's borders and threatens to destabilize the region. Events from this past weekend show that Maduro will stop at nothing to maintain power, including the use of gang violence against unarmed Venezuelan citizens. Mr. President, regardless of the results of today's vote, this resolution shows that democracies around the world, and especially in Latin America, are mobilizing behind interim President Guaido. The United States will remain steadfast in our support for the legitimate Guaido government and the National Assembly. We look forward to genuinely free and fair elections and to a government that reflects the will and aspirations of the Venezuelan people. The United States will pursue all avenues to increase humanitarian assistance to Venezuelans, both inside and outside their country. There was, in fact, an additional aid delivery today to the border region, Cucuta, Colombia, emergency medical kits for 40,000 people, high nutrition food enough for 10,000 infants for 2 months, hygiene kits for 35,000 people. I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate our concern about the safety and security of interim President Juan Guaido when he returns to Venezuela, and we hope that all members of the Council will join us in doing so. Now is the time to strengthen our commitment to the Venezuelan people. We call on members of the Security Council to join in this commitment, and I'd like to express satisfaction that a clear majority of the Council did so today. Thank you.
doy las gracias al señor.
I thank the representative of the United States. I now give the floor to the representative of Peru. Mr. President, Peru voted in favor of the resolution on Venezuela in order to enable the Security Council, in exercise of the mandate given to it under the Charter of the organization, adopt a decision which will contribute to regional peace and security. As is hoped for by the international community. We very much regret the lack of unity in this Council to contribute to addressing the situation in Venezuela, which represents an unprecedented threat to peace, security, and prosperity of the whole region. We need to avoid new escalations of violence and address the serious humanitarian situation being suffered in the country. And it's even more incomprehensible when this is a minimum text which, with a view to consensus, did not mention relevant aspects such as the constant violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms, the terrible humanitarian situation being suffered by the population, particularly the most vulnerable, the breakdown in a democratic order, the economic collapse, and the exodus of more than 3.4 million Venezuelans who have fled this terrible reality. However, we are encouraged to see that the majority of members of this Council have reaffirmed their commitment and solidarity with the brotherly people of Venezuela, and that they will continue to work towards the re-establishment of democracy in that country, an aspiration which will only be possible through the holding of free, just, credible, and open elections with the participation of all political parties as soon as possible, with international observers involved, which will make it possible to ensure that all Venezuelans are able to live in freedom and democracy. Thank you. I thank the representative of Peru. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Mr. President, China pays close attention to the situation in Venezuela, and China supports the Venezuelan government in its efforts to safeguard its national sovereignty, independence, and stability. The Venezuelan affairs should be decided by the Venezuelan people. At the Security Council, on the Venezuela issue, our starting point is to uphold the spirit of the UN Charter and the basic principles governing international relations, promote a peaceful settlement of the Venezuela issue, and maintain long-term peace, stability, and development in Latin America. China opposes external forces interfering in Venezuela internal affairs and opposes military intervention in Venezuela. It is regrettable that the draft resolution before us is seriously inconsistent with China's principles position as stated above. Therefore, China had to vote against it. China calls upon the Venezuelan government and opposition parties to seek a political solution through dialogue and consultation within the constitutional and legal framework. We hope the international community will do things that truly favor the stability and economic development of Venezuela, things that are conducive to the improvement of people's livelihood in the country. Under the premise of respecting the sovereignty of Venezuela, we should provide constructive assistance to the country to promote a smooth resolution of relevant issues as soon as possible. Any actions taken by the Security Council on Venezuela should be in line with the above principles. And I thank you, Mr. President.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of China. I now give the floor to the representative of Belgium.
Thank you, Mr. President. Belgium voted in favor of this draft resolution on the situation in Venezuela, the draft resolution that has been submitted by the United States. We did so because this resolution incorporates the critical components of resolving this crisis in the view of both Belgium and the European Union, namely a peaceful political process, fair, free, and credible presidential elections with international electoral observation in line with the Venezuelan constitution, encouragement of inclusive, peaceful, and credible initiatives, safety and security of Venezuelan citizens and political actors, and lastly, unfettered access for humanitarian aid in line with humanitarian principles. Belgium also supported this resolution because nothing in its text justifies the use of force, and because the text advocates seeking a peaceful solution. We regret the fact that some have obstructed this. As the Security Council prepares to vote on another draft, a competing draft, I wish to voice our intent to vote against this other text. Indeed, this text lacks a critical element for Belgium, as well as for the European Union. The solution to the Venezuelan crisis hinges on the organization of fair, free, and credible presidential elections. The Venezuelan people have suffered for far too long already. The time is ripe, and it is indeed past time to allow them to decide their future. We also have reservations regarding paragraph 3 of this resolution. We stress the importance of humanitarian assistance in line with the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. It is not acceptable for rogue armed groups to intimidate civilians and members of the National Assembly who have mobilized to distribute assistance. Thank you.
Agradezco al señor representante.
I thank the representative of Belgium for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Dominican Republic. Good afternoon, Mr. President. We wanted to take the floor to explain our vote in two regards. First of all, to state that for the Dominican Republic, there is no other possible solution to the crisis in Venezuela other than the holding without delay of free and competitive elections with guarantees for all groups and political stakeholders. This political, peaceful, and inclusive process must lead to Venezuelan society becoming reconciled with itself and overcoming the differences that have led to these situations of permanent tension, negatively affecting the Venezuelan people and the regional environment. Finally, and in order to avoid any suspicion, as far as we are concerned, the use of force is not an option. On the contrary, what we favor is an inclusive dialogue in which all political stakeholders and civil society will participate. This is an indispensable step towards a peaceful and democratic outcome to the situation respectful of human rights. Finally, we believe that we need to create the conditions in order to provide assistance to those who require it due to the serious humanitarian crisis afflicting Venezuelans. Thank you very much. I thank the representative of the Dominican Republic. I now give the floor to the representative of South Africa.
Mr. President, we wanted to take the floor to explain our vote. South Africa has made its position clear on the situation in Venezuela when we addressed this council 2 days ago. We reiterate our view that inclusive political dialogue is necessary to resolve the political crisis in Venezuela. We remain concerned at the serious humanitarian situation in the country and support the United Nations' efforts to provide humanitarian assistance to alleviate the hardships experienced by the people of Venezuela. Mr. President, South Africa is concerned at the irregular procedure in tabling resolution before us. The dispensing of 48-hour practice for the consideration of the draft undermines due process and our ability to meaningfully engage on the text to reach consensus. We have before us two divergent resolutions on the situation in Venezuela. This is unfortunate. South Africa believes that the Council should be unified in its approach to supporting the people of Venezuela in finding a solution to the crisis. We must speak with one voice in assisting Venezuelan people in weathering the humanitarian challenges faced as a result of political and economic difficulties in their country. However, instead of bringing the Council and the people of Venezuela together, the relations illustrates how far this Council is from contributing to deal with the crisis. The lack of unity of the Council on this matter widens the divisions and undermines the credibility of this Council to make a meaningful contribution in the solution of Venezuela. Ideally, Mr. President, the Council should adopt a resolution that will facilitate internal, inclusive, political dialogue among the people in determining their own way out of their political and economic difficulties. Furthermore, a Council resolution should facilitate the provision of international assistance based on the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and based on and through the accurate needs assessment. Thus, the provision of aid should be depoliticized and meet the needs of people of Venezuela. The President, while the resolution presented by the United States call for a peaceful political process, it is prescriptive on the outcome of this process and thus infringing on the sovereignty of Venezuela. Internal political process should remain the national prerogative of member states. From the outset,